we ought to talk about traditional publishing and my experience. But first, I want to make the announcement that I am taking all but 2 of my books off the market. If you're unaware, I am an author, more specifically a poetry author, and I've decided to take my books off the market. If you would still like to order signed copies of these books before they're gone, you may do so now through the link in my description. The books that will be leaving are Tarot, Major Arcana Poetry Zine, where I interpret different Major Arcana tarot cards through poetry. Symphoaticus, which is a parody on the styles and writing of R.H. Sin and Atticus. Quite humorous, if you ask me. And In the Mid-Hours, a poetry collection on mental health, LGBT experiences, love, and heartbreak. Multiple themes. The books that are staying are my pocketbook, Wild Honey, full of positivity and affirmations, and Girl, poems on sexuality and gender. Again, if you would like any of those books and you haven't had the chance to purchase them, do so now before they're gone forever. Link down in the description. It's time to talk traditional publishing and my experience with it. First off, what is traditional publishing? So traditional publishing is when you have a publishing press or a publishing company. Usually when people hear traditional publishing, they think of the big 5, which are like Macmillan, Penguin, and Simon and Schuster. I don't know the others. I don't even know if those that I listed were the right ones. Andrews McMillan? Andrews McNeil. Macmillan's a different one. I don't know. But usually when you hear traditional publishing, people think of those. The way I consider traditional publishing is to include small presses, like indie presses, that aren't very big, but they're still a publishing company, and you're still getting published by someone other than yourself. Make sense? I hope so. These people, this team, does all the work for you, from editing to formatting to designing cover if you don't have an idea already, to helping to market your book, whether that be in newsletters or to actually try and put them in bookstores, or to give them away to ARC reviewers, which are advanced reader copy reviewers, people who get to read the book before it comes out. They take care of all of that for you. Now, when I talk about traditional publishing for my books, I'm talking about 2 small presses, a publishing company and a press. I'm not going to name names because some of the things that I talk about aren't very positive, but it wouldn't be that difficult to find them if you were really interested. Both my books, In the Mid-Hours and Girl, have been published by a small press. I'm going to talk about In the Mid-Hours first. If you catch me reading, it's because I'm reading notes that I wrote down, because I don't want to get anything wrong. So, In the Mid-Hours was published in October of 2021. It hasn't even been a full year yet, I don't think. I don't think when this video goes up, it will be. Let's talk about its beginning months. The first stages before becoming a collection, when it was just in its draft stages. I signed my contract with this publishing company in December of 2019. And I was thrilled, beyond excited to have a publisher for my book. Fresh out of high school, have a publisher, it was insane to me. It was set to release in March of the following year, so of 2020, but then we pushed it back to May to allow leeway and room for edits and extra things that happen behind the scenes, so we didn't have to rush to get it done. But in case you haven't been keeping up with the events of the world, COVID hit, and my release day went from March to May to who knows when, and it was sad. Up until that point, though, the communication with the team was wonderful. We discussed pre-order campaigns, So would I have gifts or like bookmarks or tea to send out in people who ordered pre-orders, and gifts to reviewers who wanted to pick up the book to read before it released to everyone else, and what small businesses we'd like to partner with within those gifts for either pre-orders or reviewers. And for a bit, until COVID, we were very on top of picking and having a set release date for the collection. But despite the release not going the way any of us had envisioned or wanted, In the Mid-Hours came out 2 years later after signing the contract. Out into the world was my little book baby. I was delighted to have the long process finally over, and relief in a way. I also got to hold this finished book in my hands, and it had the most stunning cover I could have ever imagined. I mean, look at it. Look at the way it looks. Sunrise, sunset, it was beautiful. It is beautiful. But I wasn't as happy with the release as I wanted to be. As I wish I was. In the summer months of 2021, remember, the book was set to release in March/May of 2020. In the summer months of 2021, the publishing company emailed me to say that they've started the edits for my book. Now, this confused me because I was surprised. I thought the edits were already done. I thought they were being made last year when it was set to originally release. But I let it slide, thinking that they were just trying to gloss it up and make sure they didn't miss anything before we actually released the collection. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and it was okay. The end of summer came, however, and it was time to discuss the cover. I originally designed the cover. It was white with a blue diamond, sunrise, a moon, a crescent moon, and a sun with some birds over an ocean. Very simple. Probably did not. I'll try to insert a picture because I don't think I described it very well. But my publisher reached out. She said, I think we should incorporate some poem from the book into the cover. And I was like, okay, what do you have in mind? And she sent me this vibe of lavender, and the lavender is what sold me, okay? I loved my cover, but your girl is a sucker for lavender. It's a beautiful purple. So we settled for this, after a few tweaking and possibly having gold foil, which unfortunately didn't make the cut as it was too expensive, but we came out with something just as stunning. But while the new cover was underway, under a few more tweaks was complete, In the Mid-Hours was ready to go. Or I thought. So, edits still had to be made to the interior, and the synopsis was still in the process. It wasn't done. By this point, it was nearing October, and I was yet given a solid release date. I was tired of not having a date to give my readers and my fans. I wanted to promote this book, but I couldn't because I had no idea when it was coming out. And I had to wait. And God, if you know me, you know I hate waiting. About a week before the tentative release date, I get another email saying that my books might not arrive in time. Now, this is a problem for pre-orders. Pre-orders ship the same day that the book releases. And while sure you can, let your readers know if they pre-ordered that it might arrive a bit late because our shipping is experiencing delays. But at this point, is that really what I wanted to tell them? I waited months, a year, before I could be like, yes, I have a book coming out. And then months before I can give them a date. And it was so frustrating. I was done. Like I said, I was tired of the waiting and the uncertainty of it all. It had been almost 2 years, and it wasn't feeling worth it. Yet the books arrived on time. Pre-orders went up 5 days before their release, and on October 25th, In the Mid-Hours was officially published. Clap, cheer, crying. I should be happy, right? No. I sold 2 books. My mom and dad purchased them. That's the rundown of In the Mid-Hours. Now let's dive a little bit deeper. I posted a blog beforehand where I said, let's talk traditional publishing. This is the second half of it, because now I have a positive experience to add on top. But my experience publishing in the mid-hours was frustrating, it's tiring, and it's almost something I regret. While I do think this book is stunning and the cover is beautiful, I do hate it for more than just the bad publishing experience. I don't like it because my writing style has changed. I don't like the way the poems in there are written. They don't reflect who I am anymore. And while some could say, leave it up. It's nice to know where you came from. I think it would be better if I take it down. Maybe revamp it into something new and publish it some other time. But for now, it's going off the market. I wish I had more positives to say for my publishing experience within the mid-hours, but I don't. The communication fell off after my book was postponed. COVID happened, funds were non-existent for the company, and it was difficult for them to continue. They'd only published 2 books at that time. Mine was the third, had to be postponed, and all the other authors that they accepted to have their work published with went somewhere else because they just couldn't publish it. And that's not the fault of the company. That was something no one could have seen coming, thanks to COVID. But the fault of the company is the communication afterwards. Why didn't you have the edits done when the release date was in March and May of the year prior? Why come up with this cover idea again a year later? We were so set and sold on stuff already that it just felt odd and like a time waster to change things. It also almost felt like everything was forgotten, that my book was definitely rushed in the end. I didn't have any ARC reviewers, I don't think. I had set up a campaign idea for pre-orders and to give gifts to people who reviewed and pre-ordered. That never came to be. There was no communication on that. The small businesses we were supposed to partner with, they decided to partner with Modestine Teas, which is a beautiful company, but that wasn't the one I had in mind. So what was the point of me partnering? It was just confusing, and I wish it were better. On a happier and lighter note, we can talk about my book, Girl. And although I'm going to be saying positive things, I'm not going to name the press. Because again, it feels a bit disrespectful to the other one. But you can find it in the description if you really are curious. Let's give a rundown on my book, Girl. Ignoring the horror story I just told you and experience, I was determined to put forth another collection with, again, another small press. I settled on one that just started up a few weeks actually before I submitted to them. The contract for Girl was signed in March, and immediately I was given a rundown of how things would operate from then on forward. And my worries with dealing with another nightmare press diminished, like they were gone. Days after the first round of edits were made, I signed the contract, they told me everything that was happening, and that same week, edits were made for me to approve. I was just everything moved so fast. The cover was designed, an estimated release date was set up. I was on my way to contacting Blurbs, and they were telling me that they're already making a list of reviewers to send the books to. And I was just this is how things go with a press? So smoothly? So, not even, it doesn't have to be that fast, but so smooth and so straightforward. I had that same excitement that I had when I first published in the mid-hours. When I signed that contract for my last collection, that's the feeling I had with Girl. And it was a good feeling. It was a hopeful and exciting feeling. The cover reveal went up in April. Pre-orders went up in May. Big difference compared to pre-orders in the mid-hours, which only went up for 5 days. For Girl, they went up for a month. And merch was set up. Merch, if you want merch, I don't have it linked anywhere, but if you want merch for my book, Girl, leave a comment and I'll direct you there. There's a backpack. It's just a pink backpack and it says girl, but I really want it. Like, I'm trying to save up for my own merch. And by the time June came around, which is when I released Girl, I was like, my heart was so full. I couldn't believe that after In the Mid Hours, something so positive and wonderful could happen with my writing. The company and I went back and forth through email with what was expected, and if we had any questions, they were answered practically immediately, from where my book was being sold to a list of indie bookstores they would reach out to, and how many book bloggers they were sending free reader copies to. There was no point in time where I felt I was being left in the dark for more than a week. It was a refreshing experience and has been, by far, the best experience I've ever had with a press, and it's the happiest collection I've ever come to publish. Thanks to the wonderful team and the great communication, behind-the-scenes work, and the on-time scheduling of everything, Girl sold 35 copies the first month, and it hit Amazon's bestsellers list in LGBT poetry twice. Not once, twice. I can say with certainty that my experience with this press was so amazing that I recommended it to friends multiple times, and I even sent a second collection to be published with them. That's how welcoming and good this press was. With that quick rundown, let's talk about the differences between my first book and this last book, a bit more in depth. So like I mentioned, the communication with the latter press for Girl was so much better. I was not left in the dark at all. If I had a question, it was basically immediately answered. And while questions were answered with the other publishing company, it felt more simple to ask this company more. I didn't feel as intimidated. And pre-orders are very important for an author. It lets people know that your book is worth getting. Bookstores look at pre-order numbers. If you have a lot of pre-orders, bookstores know that they can buy that book and they can sell it and not have to worry about losing profit of their own. So when In the Mid Hours only had pre-orders up for 5 days, it was more like, what's the point? Why have pre-orders up for 5 days? That's not long enough to get enough hype. And I was disappointed with that short time frame. But for Girl, pre-orders went up a month ahead of time. And that was probably more than enough time that it needed. I mean, if you look at the success rates, for In the Mid Hours, I only sold 2 copies to my parents. But for Girl, I hit Amazon's bestseller list twice. That is a big difference. 35 copies sold in the first month might not seem a lot to bigger authors or bigger presses, but for an indie author in a small press that I am and with, that was an amazing number. And in fact, it was the most copies of a book that I've ever sold in a year. It's amazing to think about. And again, the whole keeping up to date and informing me of things, like this press for Girl was really on top of things. They were straightforward from the get-go. Like, I knew what to expect, and I hadn't even signed the contract yet. Like, I was just so amazed. I mean, the first email, they mentioned putting my book in a bookstore. For In the Mid Hours, I actually reached out to bookstores myself to ask if they'd be interested in stocking my book, to which I then got an email saying I should probably let my publishers know before I do such a thing, which makes sense, but also the reason I forward them the email and left their contact information is so the bookstore can get back to them. But they weren't really doing much to put my book out there, and I was a little annoyed because that's all I really wanted, my book in a bookstore, to feel like that's me and I made it. And again, I want to end this video because it's more so just a rant and a talk about my 2 very different experiences with publishing. I want to end this by saying not every small press is a nightmare. You might find a press that you don't vibe with, or an agent that you don't vibe with, and you're more than welcome to leave them. You don't have to stay with a company or an agent that's not going to represent you or your work the way you want to be represented. You deserve to feel special and proud of what you put out into the world. Like with the press that published Girl, things are good when you find that perfect match for your book. And honestly, don't shy away from submitting to places, because the feeling is overwhelming in the best way possible. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you maybe learned something as well. Maybe. I don't know. Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Bye-bye.